Number 1. A few years ago, I lived in a large apartment complex. The building was 10 stories high, and my apartment was on the 8th floor. It was a bad area with a lot of crime. I was planning to move out soon, so I never bothered to get to know any of my neighbors. One Friday night, I came home from a hard day at work and was feeling very tired. I got into the elevator and pressed the button for my floor. When the doors opened, there was a man standing there. He was dressed in a long overcoat, and his hat was pulled down low over his eyes. "Hello," I said, trying to be polite. The man didn't answer. As I got out of the elevator, he pushed past me roughly and got into the elevator and started pressing the buttons. "What a jerk," I muttered to myself. I unlocked my apartment door and went inside. I went straight to the bathroom. While I was washing my hands, I happened to glance in the mirror and noticed something strange. There was a dark red stain on the sleeve of my shirt. It looked like blood. Then, I remembered the rude guy who had bumped into me at the elevator. It made me feel sick. I didn't know where the blood had come from, but I did have my suspicions. I immediately locked my front door. Then I took a shower and threw the blood-stained shirt in the trash. I didn't sleep very well that night. The next day was a Saturday, and I had a date with an attractive young woman I had met. I was getting ready to leave when I heard my doorbell ring. "Who could that be?" I muttered in irritation. I was already late for my date, and I didn't want to waste any more time. Peering through the peephole, I saw a policeman standing outside. "What is it?" I asked loudly through the door. "I'm sorry to disturb you, sir," he said politely. "I wanted to ask you some questions. There was a murder last night in the apartment next door to yours." I was late for my date and I didn't want to get involved. "Sorry, officer, I didn't see anything," I lied. "But you may be able to help us," said the policeman. "Did you see anybody suspicious? Can you at least open the door to talk?" "I wasn't at home last night," I lied again. "Sorry, officer, I can't help you." "All right, sir," the policeman responded. "Thank you for your time." He walked off down the hallway, and I continued getting ready for my date. For the next few days, I felt very nervous. My next-door neighbor had been murdered. The neighborhood was really unsafe. I was glad I was moving out soon. I also felt very guilty about lying to the policeman. After all, I had seen the murderer. Even though I hadn't seen his face, perhaps there was something I could have told the police that would help them catch the killer. Sometimes, crimes are solved by one little detail. One morning, before I went to work, I was wondering if the police had managed to solve the case. I turned on the TV and watched the news, but they didn't mention anything about the murder. When I was leaving for work, I noticed a bad smell in the hallway. It seemed to be coming from the apartment next door to mine. I had a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. I went to find the building manager and told him about the smell. When I mentioned the murder, he said there hadn't been any murder in this building. I convinced him to come back up to my floor. When he smelled the stench, he used his master key to open my neighbor's apartment. Both of us were horrified by what we found. My neighbor was on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. The smell was overpowering. He had been lying there for days. Number 2. Johnny Stevens was an old alcoholic. Every morning when the local bar opened, he would go inside and order a drink. He would not emerge until closing time, drunk and disoriented. Then he would stagger home and fall into bed. One rainy, windy night, the old man was on his way home and decided to take a shortcut through an alley. A gust of wind blew a tile off a roof just as he was walking by. The tile hit him on the head and smashed into tiny pieces. The man was knocked to the ground. As he struggled to his feet, clutching his aching head, he looked up. "Who did that?" he asked out loud. The wind whistled through the alley, and he thought he heard a faint voice whisper, "Nobody." The man turned around quickly. The alley was dark and deserted. Nobody was there. "Who said that?" he demanded. Nobody replied. The old man continued down the alley, craning his neck and looking around him furtively. Shadows flickered across the stone walls. "Who's there?" he shouted. Nobody heard him. His pace quickened and fear gripped his heart. He had the sneaking feeling that somebody was following him. A chill went down his spine and he began to run. Suddenly he slipped on something, stumbled and fell to his knees. "Who tripped me?" he cried. Nobody answered. Through the wind and the rain, he thought he could hear somebody breathing heavily. The sound seemed to be very close. He scrambled to his feet and shouted, "Keep away from me. Don't come near." Nobody listened to his cries. Desperately, the old man felt around in the darkness. His hand came across a piece of wood lying on the ground. It was thick and heavy, and had a long rusty nail sticking out of it. Picking it up, he started swinging it back and forth. "Get back," he screamed. "Get away from me." He lashed out at the darkness, using the length of wood like a club. He accidentally swung the piece of wood too hard and hit himself in the head. The force of the blow drove the rusty nail right into his brain and killed him. The next day, 2 policemen were walking their beat when they came across the dead body lying in the gutter. "Who would have killed him?" asked one of the policemen, thinking out loud. The wind whistled through the alley, and he thought he heard a faint voice whisper, "Nobody." Number 3. Last year, my company held a New Year's Eve party. When the party was over, I left to catch the last train home that night. I sat down in my seat and gazed out the window at the city lights flashing by. After a while, I saw that the only other person in the carriage with me was a man in a black trench coat. He was sitting a few rows in front of me, and his head was hanging down. He appeared to be dozing off. I was quite sleepy too, and my eyelids started to feel very heavy. It wasn't long until I began to doze off too. A few minutes later, I was jolted awake by the rattling of the train. When I opened my eyes, something seemed different. I wasn't sure, but it seemed as if the man in the black trench coat was one seat closer to me. I thought I was just imagining things and told myself not to be so paranoid. Not long afterwards, I began to doze off again. After a few seconds, I got a strange and unpleasant feeling in the pit of my stomach. I opened my eyes, and this time, the man seemed to have moved even closer to me. Still, I couldn't be sure. It was extremely unsettling. I decided to try and see if my suspicions were correct. My plan was to pretend to fall asleep again, but keep one eye half open just to see what the man would do. He just sat there, not moving a muscle. I could feel his eyes staring at me, but he didn't budge an inch. Just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, I heard him muttering something under his breath. Listening closely, I could make out what he was saying over and over. "Don't be fooled, she's just pretending. Don't be fooled, she's just pretending." It made my blood run cold. My heart started pounding in my chest. Despite being scared out of my wits, I kept my head down, pretending to doze off and desperately hoping that the train would reach the next station soon. When it finally stopped and the doors opened, I bided my time and waited for the right moment. Just as the doors were about to close, I scrambled out of my seat and jumped out onto the platform. I heard the door shut behind me and turned around. As the train pulled out of the station, I saw the man in the black trench coat standing up, his face pressed against the window. There was a look of fury on his face, and in his hand a glistening knife. Ever since then, I never take the last train home alone. Number 4. One evening I was standing at the pedestrian crossing on a busy street waiting for the light to change. I looked over at the people who were standing on the other side of the street, and the chill went down my spine. There was a woman standing opposite me who looked very strange. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I could see her pants and jacket perfectly, but her face and hands were a complete blur. I rubbed my eyes and looked again, but it made no difference. Her face was fuzzy and indistinct. I got the strangest impression that I could almost see through her. It was extremely unnerving. The light turned green and people began to walk across the pedestrian crossing. The woman appeared to be walking straight towards me. I began walking across the intersection, veering to the left, attempting to avoid her, but it didn't work. She changed direction and walked right up to me. We passed in the middle of the street, and as she walked by me, I heard her hiss, "I know you can see me." If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up, share it with your friends, drop a comment, or subscribe to my channel. It would mean a lot to me, and it would also help grow the channel. Thank you. Stay safe, and see you on the next episode.